Good afternoon, and thank you all for being with us. I'm Anne Collins Goodyear, co-director of the Bowdoin College Museum of Art, and it is a pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to A Quantum Exchange, a panel discussion with artists Abigail DeVille and Daniel Minter. Tonight's program takes place with the support of many partners. It is offered in collaboration with Parable Path Maine, an interdisciplinary and multi-institutional exploration of racial justice, climate justice, and gender justice, as well as faith, following a framework established by the musician and activist Toshi Reagon, who is the 2022-2023 Joseph McKeen Visiting Fellow here at Bowdoin College. Her operatic version of Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower will be performed on Friday in Portland. We thank Parable Path Maine, Indigo Arts Alliance, the Maine Humanities Council, and the Halley Harrisburg 90 and Michael Rosenfeld Artist-in-Residence program for all they have done to make this evening's event possible. On that note, it is my honor to introduce our panelists, Abigail DeVille and Daniel Minter. As you will learn from their comments, each of these exceptional artists has engaged directly with the Parable of the Sower and the broader themes raised by this visionary novel, which charts a path forward through political upheaval and social strife with an unwavering focus on the future. Based in New York City, Abigail DeVille is the current Halley Harrisburg 90 and Michael Rosenfeld Artist-in-Residence at Bowdoin College. During her residency, Abigail has been extraordinarily generous with her time and expertise in meeting with students and getting to know the Bowdoin community. We thank our colleagues in the Department of Visual Arts and in the George J. Mitchell Department of Special Collections and Archives for doing so much to help build these connections. Through her work, Abigail uses history as a medium to envision a new future, celebrated for an expansive practice that includes sculpture, mixed media, and site-specific installations. Abigail draws new attention to marginalized peoples and places and empowers her audience by demonstrating her interest in their stories. Among her many honors are awards from the Joan Mitchell Foundation, the Edward and Sally Van Leer Fund of the New York Community Trust, and Creative Capital. She is also a recipient of the Obie Award for Design and a Rome Prize from the American Academy in Rome. She has held residencies at the Studio Museum in Harlem and the International Studio and Curatorial Program in Brooklyn. DeVille received her BFA from the Fashion Institute of Technology and her MFA from Yale University. She has also studied at Pratt Institute and the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, where she returned as a faculty member last summer. Her work is currently featured at the Bronx Museum in the exhibition Bronx Heavens, Abigail DeVille. The show is on view until June 18th, and I urge you to see it. And some of you may also have seen Abigail recently in the exhibition, a new show exploring what it means for artists to put their work into the public arena. Daniel Minter, based here in Mid-Coast, Maine, is the founder of the Indigo Arts Alliance in Portland, is co-founder of the Indigo Arts Alliance in Portland with his wife Marcia, and the founding director of Maine Freedom Trails. His influential work on the interracial settlement on Malaga Island, which was forcibly disbanded in 1912, has brought new visibility to the unjust and tragic fate of that community. Like Abigail, Daniel Minter reaches into history to create artwork that enables us to understand more clearly the intersection between the past, the present, and the future. Daniel is known for his work in the mediums of painting and assemblage, and his practice also extends to printmaking, sculpture, and illustration. His work often deals with themes of displacement and diaspora, ordinary and extraordinary Blackness, spirituality in the Afro-Atlantic world, and the recreation of meanings of home. Daniel Minter is also an award-winning children's book illustrator. His publications include Going Home with Daddy, winner of a 2000 Caldecott honor, Ellen's Broom, which received a Coretta King illustration honor, 7 Spools of Thread, a Kwanzaa story, winner of a Best Book Award from the Oppenheim Toy Portfolio, and The Riches of Osceola McCarty, named an honor book by the Carter G. Woodson Awards. In 2004 and 2011, Daniel was commissioned to create Kwanzaa stamps for the U.S. Postal Service. His work has been collected and exhibited at institutions across the country, including a recent show at the Center for Maine Contemporary Art. We are proud to have added his A Distant Holla from the Mouth of the New Meadows River of 2020 to the collection of the Bowdoin College Museum of Art last summer, when it was included in At First Light, 2 Centuries of Art in Maine. As you can tell, we have a wonderful program in store for us this evening. Daniel will speak first and will then be followed by Abigail. After Abigail's remarks come to a close, I will join them on stage to begin a discussion about their work. The conversation will then be opened up to the audience, so we look forward to hearing your thoughts and questions. And now, please join me in welcoming Daniel and Abigail.
Hello, everyone. How y'all doing? I'm going to show you a few of my images, some of my artwork, so that you can familiarize yourself with the work that I do in order to give context to the following conversation that Abigail and I will have. The first image I'll show you is actually the title of the talk, A Quantum Exchange. The work that I do usually begins with a question to myself. I'm always asking myself questions. I'm always trying to understand what's happening around me and how to understand the world around me. And I do this through my artwork. So I'm speaking to myself, trying to solve this conundrum of existence. And once I'm finished, I try to share it with others, somewhat, or find out what they see in the work. This piece, for me, I feel like it answered quite a few questions for me. You see on one panel, it's a triptych. In one panel, there's a young man. He's dancing, and that is I'm looking into the act of connecting with the world through our bodies, through your physical presence in the world, and connecting to using that body to connect to a spiritual world, which is in the second panel. And in that spirit, and in making that connection to this spiritual world, we use all of the other things that are in this, that exist in this world, to understand that. And then once we have made those connections, we are able to place ourselves in that realm where there are no physical bodies and there are no separation between the things that exist in this world and ourselves. So this piece for me uses a lot of the symbols that you will see throughout my artwork. It touches on a lot of the ideas that are in other pieces of my work. This piece does a little bit of the same type of a thing. It's more looking at my origins and looking at my how is it that that me, someone from the diaspora, brought to this land, against my will, grown up in South Georgia, in rural South Georgia, feels such a connection to that land that's been really, really harsh, and a place that where a lot of ambivalence lies. So there are a lot of reasons for me to dislike that area, but I do not. I love it. I feel a close connection to it, and I feel like that's because of the way that when we are of this world, we plant ourselves wherever we are, and we forever reach downward so that we can nourish ourselves from the very center of this earth. So everywhere on this earth is our place. We belong everywhere. This piece is one of the Malaga Island series pieces. Malaga Island works are pieces that I created to do a very, very specific thing. To help tell the story, the complicated story of the people removed from Malaga Island, people removed from their homes forcibly. It's complicated, but it's very common. It's something that happens all over this country, that has happened in lots of different places, but yet it's something that people like to think of as being an individual kind of thing, something that happens in this place, something that happens only in this place or this place and this place. But it is really a pattern of happenings. And I created the artwork to simplify the way of looking at it, to see the individuals of that narrative, but yet be able to see them as not being dispossessed, but remaining in possession of the things that, like I talked about in the beginning, of the last piece, that rootedness of your existence wherever you are. And a simple way of looking at those pieces is there's a single figure, and that figure is very, very rooted in their place and holding something. That something that they're holding is that something that cannot be taken from a person, that cannot be taken even after your life has been taken, you still possess that thing. So that piece has become a sort of a symbolic piece in my work, that figure with the hands held in that position. This is another piece from that series, from advancing that series, the way that I think about Malaga Island story. This is a piece that connects the removal of the inhabitants of the families on Malaga Island with a larger story of removal, of the removal and extermination, the Holocaust, of the Jewish people who were exterminated, and how that connects to the eugenics story that developed in this country and then grew into the Holocaust. This piece relates back to the very first piece that I talked about, the way that I talked about your existence being part of the material and place where you live. This piece is a Malaga Island piece, but in this piece, I imagine the essence of the people being embedded in the material, in the place of the island, there waiting for us to come back and have conversation with that presence and with that material. This also is another part of the Malaga Island series, and it is I call these sculptural collages, and they are generally, paintings, collage, wood carvings, found objects, lots of different material artifacts that I collage into a way to help tell a story, to bring a narrative forward. Many times I'll do these in multiple ways, because if, for instance, the pieces that are adjacent to each other, that are next to each other, are just like the pieces that I showed you earlier, the single figure. But once they are connected to each other, they expand on the narrative of each other and give you a more complex story. This piece is a piece that was at the Portland Museum of Art. It's called A Distant Hollow, and taking that title, A Distant Hollow, I used that title on a lot of different pieces, on many pieces of artwork, because it relates to something I was talking about from the first piece, the idea that wherever you are, you're of that place. This piece, the term "a distant hollow," I refer to the distant sound of someone calling you, or the distant cry of someone, or the distant present. You are either making that sound, or either you are hearing that sound. We are all trying to reach out to each other, and this work, A Distant Hollow, is to help us understand that we are all out there for each other, even though sometimes it seems like we're alone. There's someone still there. That distant hollow also reaches across time. It's not just about the presence. The cry from people long ago, especially in relation to this conversation right here, the people from Malaga Island who we can hear them from 100 years ago. We can still hear them. Sometimes, I think that we hear them even more clearly today than we heard them in 1912. In 1912, it was as though no one was listening to them. They were only talking about them, but no one was listening to them. So after 100 years, that distant holler is a lot clearer. This is another piece that is also at the Portland Museum of Art, and it is also called A Distant Holler. But it's called A Distant Holler Currency Exchange, and the themes of this work relates to the idea that our bodies, when this country was formed, our bodies were brought here as currency, and therefore the idea of currency exchange. And looking at through the different images in the work, you see things that relate to different forms of exchange. Like one is you'll see the gold, you'll see different animals, you'll see plants in the piece. This one is done in a similar fashion. It's also called A Distant Holler. So is this one. This is from the most recent works that I had. This is from the works that were at the CMCA. This piece you can see it has that same positioning of the hands as the Malaga Island pieces. And this piece has no figures in it, but the idea is still there. You still see the vertical, you see that upright positioning. You don't have to have a figure there for you to feel the presence of figures. This is a piece from the CMCA. This piece is also a version of Distant Holler, but this piece is about the idea of looking for the possibility even of making it to a future, because none of us can even really imagine a future. We can only move forward a day at a time. And this is the last image. Okay. All right, so this is the last image from that. All right, thank you. Abigail, you're up. Mm-hmm.
So before I start, I have a ton of slides, and I do not intend to speak about any of them in length. I just like to look at a lot of pictures, but so there's something from, there's an idea of space-time that I've been thinking about, or I've been continuously thinking about for a long time, and I got this off of the Stanford website, so I did not write this, but in 1906, soon after Albert Einstein announced his special theory of relativity, his former colleague, teacher in mathematics, Hermann Minkowski, developed a new scheme for thinking about space and time that emphasized its geometric qualities. In his famous quotation delivered at a public lecture on relativity, he announced that the views of space and time which I wish to lay before you have sprung from the soil of experimental physics, and therein lies their strength. They are radical, henceforth space by itself and time by itself are doomed to fade away into mere shadows, and only a kind of union of the two will persevere, an independent reality. This new reality was that space and time as physical constructs have to be combined in a new mathematical physical entity called space-time, because the equations of relativity show that both the space and time coordinates of any event must get mixed together by the mathematics in order to accurately describe what we see. Because space consists of 3 dimensions and time is one-dimensional, space-time must therefore be a 4-dimensional object. It is believed to be a continuum because so far as we know, there are no missing points in space or instances of time, and both can be subdivided without any apparent limit in size or duration. So physicists now routinely consider our world to be embedded in this 4-dimensional space-time continuum, and all events, places, moments in history, actions, and so are described in terms of their location in space-time. So this is the thing that really makes me hot, but space-time does not evolve, it simply exists. When we examine a particular object from the standpoint of its space-time representation, every particle is located along its world line. This is a spaghetti-like line that stretches from the past to the future, showing the spatial location of the particle at every instant in time. This world line exists as a complete object, which may be sliced here and there so that you can see where the particle is located in space at a particular instant. Once you determine the complete world line of a particle from the forces acting upon it, you have solved for its complete history. The world line does not change with time, but simply exists as a timeless object. So there's a way in which I'm thinking this as an overarching theme within a body of work that I've been working on for about 10, 12 years. If I'm looking at it collectively as a whole and thinking about the moments in which this spaghetti-like line is stretching from one place to another, and then thinking about the ways in which I've engaged in that particular space and time to try to delve into the history, the location, and thinking about it from this very specific point in time or place. I know it sounds really abstract, but I'm kind of an abstract artist anyway, but this piece in particular, the image that you're looking at, is from an installation called Wild Seed, which was named after another Octavia Butler novel that she wrote in 1980 about these 2 eternal beings. And I could not put that book down. That book is incredible. But I made this piece in Venice in 2013, and they're from reclaimed piles, so where they park the gondolas. I worked with an architect who lived in the area, and he was able to get access to the place where they throw away all of the discarded ones, the rotting ones, and we set them up in this 15th century palazzo in a kind of, I think it was a constellation formation. And then I just went to the supermarket and got a bunch of plastic bags and tore them up. But my idea of thinking about the wild seed was the thing that dies, or the thing that how a seed, in order for it to germinate, it has to die in the ground in order to spring forth. But thinking about the constant ways in which all of the seeds that are planted and the things that have to die in order for things to progress. So there is a bunch of, you can see it only in this image, there's a bunch of trash bags that I had fashioned into body bags and filled with dirt that are laying at the base of these trees. This is another piece that I made in response to another Octavia Butler novel called Kindred, and it was, I don't remember when this was. I think this was 2016 at University of Illinois in Normal, and their university galleries. But I was thinking there's a lot of time travel that happens in that particular novel as well, and so there's also this relationship to this domestic space or interior where there's a constant breaking of a wall, which also I think ties into the thing that I had just read in terms of thinking about time as a 4-dimensional object, right? Like this person is moving forwards and backwards in time, they're interacting with their ancestors, they're disrupting, events and times and changing kind of future outcome, and then also kind of protecting the evil of the past in order to exist in the present. And so for some reason I thought of the food chain, and also I'm very crazy about pyramids and triangles in general, and triangles being the strongest structural shape. But so it was kind of almost like the food pyramid. And also I was in the Midwest, so I got really excited about getting corn, So that's why there's corn everywhere all over the place. But there's so just giving an overview, there's a way in which I use cosmology as a compositional device to organize really disparate ideas and bits of information that we have of the past and our understanding of the present. And there exists like multiple bodies of work, but these are just a few of the ones that I made about my family in particular. And I think this series was also called, it was called Universal Truth Table. So early on in my thinking, I was thinking about mathematics as a kind of structure for visual problems, even though it quickly departed and has nothing to do with math, really, but like thinking about lost histories, and then roving through my family's archive of images and using that and trying to tell the story with objects that were in my grandmother's apartment. So my grandmother had a box of cheap linoleum floor tile that never made it onto the floor, and so I took those and put some collages on top of that. This figure at the bottom is my grandmother, and then the guy that is walking, I think, is the first person who migrated from Richmond to Harlem in the 1930s, and that's her grandfather, and he owned a barbershop on Lenox Avenue. And so also around the same time period, that collage is from probably about 2008, 2009. This is from maybe 2011. But thinking about if I could destroy a material, is there a larger connection that I could make to time, like in actually like breaking down a material's essence and trying to connect like the holes in memory or the things that were left unspoken between family members, or the things that are deposited as material kind of inheritances, and the spaces, the breaks in between, right? The things that we will never know. But if in destroying the material, can I actually like harken back to like the birth of the universe or something? And then those are two family members from Virginia that I don't really know who they are. That's my dad trimming the Christmas tree in the 1950s and on another linoleum floor tile. These were my grandmother's cigarette butts that I had collected for a period of time. And actually, I was a participant at Skowhegan in 2007, and I think I brought these cigarette butts up there with me. But anyway, so I was to drag grandma along for everything. She don't want to go. So this is called Hooverville Torqued Ellipse, and it's kind of my response to the 2008 like housing crisis, but it was made with all these materials from a dump in Philadelphia called Revolutionary Recovery, and there's a recycled artist-in-residence there. That this was like, I was one of their proto residents for that residency in 2012, but they helped me build this thing, and it was based off of one of Richard Serra's torqued ellipse. So a lot of these installations really are based on, or the way that they're just kind of like this roving form is based on this idea of black holes and the collapse of, or the imploding of a star, and thinking about the kinds of infinite problems that exist within American society, and then what is the quickest way that you can kind of organize all of this chaotic information and reframe the material history of our current moment that we're all living in. The candy bar that we ate yesterday and threw the wrapper on the floor kind of thing, making its way back into an institutional space and having the potential to maybe communicate to you in a different way. But this was in 2017 at the ICA LA, and it's called No Space Hidden, and then in parentheses shelter, but it was in homage to Noah Purfoy's shelter, which he created in the 1980s in Joshua Tree, which was responding to the homeless housing crisis in Los Angeles in the 80s, which is ongoing, but also the location of where this museum is very close to Skid Row. And so it was also a critique of the institution, even though I still took the show, because the ICALA used to be the Santa Monica Museum, and they renamed themselves and moved into the burgeoning arts district, which is encroaching upon Skid Row, and it's across the street from the Greyhound bus station. And I got to see lots of strange things that happens when art and poverty butt up against one another, and kind of disingenuous engagements with the local community. That was strange. I shouldn't tell the story, but I'm gonna tell it anyway. But there was this one day that the former director of that museum had wandered outside, and there was a man who was living on the street who couldn't speak. And he would always be sleeping maybe at the gates, like where the museum was. And she said one day, we should do something for him. And I was just like, oh Lord, you know. I walked away, and I went to the bodega next door, and the people who owned the bodega next door were feeding him. That's why he was always there. And he was sitting outside with a plate of food, you know, like eating rice and beans or whatever. And I'm like, this community here is already taking care of him. Like, you know what I mean? Like the ways in which you've just been socially conditioned to be blind to the systems of care that already exist in different communities. But moving along. I don't even know how I got on that. But I feel like, anyway, it's a part of everything that we're talking about. This was at the Whitney in 2017. It was called Empire State Works in Progress, and it was based on a 1968 Calder performance of the same name. Oh, that's it. Thank you.
Abigail and Daniel, thank you both so much for those absolutely beautiful talks. One word that comes to mind when I hear each of you speak and when I look at your work is poetic, because it's obvious to me that your work operates on so many different levels. And I want to acknowledge to the audience that ahead of time I drew up some questions for Abigail and Daniel to give them some sense of what was on my mind, but I'm going to go a little bit off script right now, if I may, as I thought I might, because I knew when I heard your talks, some new associations would come to mind. And one of the things that struck me when each of you was speaking actually has to do with a seeming paradox, which is the paradox of how visual art addresses those things to which we are blind. And Abigail, I loved the story that you told about that gentleman in Los Angeles who was being nurtured by his community in ways that were not necessarily obvious to newcomers to that neighborhood. And Daniel, I love the work that you've done with Malaga Island. And what's so interesting to me is, of course, the challenge of describing a history that in some ways is no longer visible by design. And so I wondered if you might each be willing to speak a little bit about how you contemplate and respond to the challenge of that which we cannot see by design or by lack of experience or for other reasons, and what that means for a visual artist who's responding to the past and thinking about the present moment and the future.
I think one thing is, I always say this, but kind of like death of ego and going into a place with a like open heart and open mind and trying not to have any kind of preconceived ideas of what you're going to make in a particular space or place, and trying to be open to the things that you're going to learn. And I think sometimes also in terms of like thinking about a project or conceiving a project, the words are incredibly important. There's words that always like spark a kind of idea or another rabbit hole that takes you to someplace else unexpected. Yeah, I I typed this up, but I didn't read it. I'm just gonna say this one quote from Maya Angelou with this conversation that she had in a kind of class with Dave Chappelle. I don't remember when that was, but it's old. She said, "I believe that a word is a thing. It is non-visible and audible only for the time it's there. It hangs in the air. I believe it is a thing. I believe it goes into the upholstery and into the rugs and into my hair and into my clothes and finally into my body. I believe that words are things and I live on them." But I think that's true of all of us, right? That they are permeating everything, right? Like they hang into the air, they get into our body. We know when we're being told the truth and when we're being told a lie based on how our body feels and how it's processing that information, or then also how those words then live like in the upholstery of a chair that gets discarded and then picked up and reused into an artwork, and thinking about the potential of it being a verb in a new language that's being created.
I love that. Thank you.
Wow, that's great. Thank you. Look forward to it. I may have lost pieces of the question, you know, but I do have. One of the things about trying to show something that is not visible and trying to express something that is not visible is that, or that you can't see, you know. Our minds are built to create things, you know. Our minds are built to imagine things. So we all have things that we think we know. We all have things that we think we see. But we can't get anywhere until we have locked on to something that we recognize or something that we think we recognize, and we use that thing to explain another thing that we do not understand. And we bring these things together that we think we recognize and that we think we understand to solve the problem of the things that we don't understand, the new things. And so we have to start with something familiar, you know. That can be, that something familiar can be, you know, a sound, you know. That something familiar can be a color, you know, and you can take from that color and then you go from that. So that's how you get to the things that are unseen. And as far as history goes, and things that were concealed, you know, we start to build on things that are, we start to build our beliefs and the ways we recognize things on deceptions, you know. So the deception is the thing that you recognize. So that is what you're working with. And those types of things are even more difficult to overcome in artwork. That's why but one of the things that I feel like artwork is particularly good at doing is disrupting those ideas.
Thank you both for those really profound and beautiful reflections. And Daniel, your language about deception I find very powerful. And in a way that provides perhaps a segue to a second question that I'd like to pose to you. And after this, I'm going to open it up for the audience to chime in. But I am extremely interested, obviously, in the whole problem of truth. But along those lines, something I find very intriguing about the work that you each do, which is moving forward the practice of visual art in so many important ways, is that each of you partake of the language of science. whether we are thinking in terms of Einsteinian space-time continuum, whether we are thinking in terms of quantum theory. And I wondered if you could each perhaps share with us why the language of science is important in terms of the work that you each do.
Would you like to take that? Okay. One of the things I love about Abigail's work is that she's working with energy. She's taken these materials, these materials, these things, these objects that have had a life, that they've had an existence. They have been one thing, but yet they are still here. They are, and she transforms them into another thing. She takes that she shows us the entropy, that is happening all around us, within our, within our lives that we try to ignore every day, but it's there. We cannot escape it. It is how, it is time space. It's entropy. It's there, and I like the way that she uses those materials. I enjoy using used materials in my work, works that have had one life and have energy embedded them in one form, and I use that energy to bring forth another idea. And I've started rambling, but I've forgotten your question. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yes, it was a question about science,
okay,
and
science.
why
Okay,
the language
all
of
right,
science
okay,
matters.
Okay, well, okay, I see.
But I
how
loved
was
your
talking
comments
about
about energy.
Science, I'm talking about the ideas that that energy that cannot be destroyed. It can only be changed. That idea, and that idea is always present when I'm making work. I'm thinking is that nothing is destroyed. It is only changed, and and we all know that God is change.
Yes, nicely said.
I think about science because it's like the standardized faith of the day, maybe. Like it's the thing that people want to agree upon mostly, depending on who you're talking to. But it's also a faith-based practice like everything else. Like nobody has the answers. You know what I'm saying? Like everything is a practice, and we're all figuring out what it means to be alive in the moment that we're in, and trying to dust off the lessons of the past and not to forget them in the present. And so I think that's why it's probably the most democratic thing that I could think of to use to open up a conversation or build a framework to think through historical events, because that's maybe something else that people want to stick their imaginations on, right? Like the possibility of like space travel or things that we can never see or actually touch that end up being permanent abstractions, unless you have $1 billion and you want to go take a ride with whoever, whatever. I won't even say the names, but like it's something that is continuously longed for. Like understanding is something that is continuously longed for, right? Like you work and you're trying to grasp something, and it's always just out of you or out of reach. And the way that we understand things, it's just so small in comparison to everything else, but it's still worth the effort to try to do it. And so that, for me, it's not a manipulation tactic, but it's a way to frame a conversation.
Absolutely. I do want to open the conversation here in a moment. May I just ask one last question, Daniel, prompted by your comment that God is change, which is a quotation that comes from the Parable of the Sower. And Abigail, I also take your comments to space travel as being, in a sense, something of a reference to the Parable of the Sower and Octavia Butler's writing, perhaps more generally. Might you each just be able to share perhaps a brief reflection, since we are here in part because of the Parable Path Maine, about your sense of your relationship to Octavia Butler's work or to themes that her work raises, with which we're still grappling today?
Well, I've been a fan of Octavia Butler for a long time and I've read all of her books. And Wild Seed was like a huge favorite of mine. And then there was Parable of the Sower, which struck a different note. It was very intense, very personal, and I won't even say prophetic, because it was not. She was just looking at what was there. She was like, it's right here, folks. It's right here. This is what I'm talking about. It wasn't prophetic. She was just reading. She was reading the world. And it's taken us 20 years to learn how to read that well, but now we can read, so and we can see what's happened. But that's what I got. That's what I got from Parable of the Sower, and I've read it multiple times, and each time I get something to get more and more from it. And I really can't iterate enough the idea of observation, because the book is about observation. It's about paying attention to what is happening around you. It's about being present. It's about believing yourself, and understanding what you need to do to exist in the world. And so that the book has just many, many lessons.
Thank you.
Damn, you got me caught up on believing yourself. I just feel like that's just, oh God. I mean, that's just what it means to be an artist, right? Like that, you're not a lunatic, and that the things that you do perceive, or maybe your inclinations that you don't necessarily have language for in the moment, is something worth pursuing, even if there isn't an end goal or undetermined outcome. I don't know.
I love what you've just said. And the other thing that I love is that this, I think, opens up space for questions from members of the audience. So I am going to actually hand off my microphone to Amanda Skinner. And if you all don't mind, just because we want to capture people's ideas, we're going to actually ask, if you don't mind, that you use the microphones here. Is that okay? But Amanda, may I give this to you?
Hello. This question is for Abigail. There is one. Would you be willing to put this?
Sure.
There is a piece that you had. I think when it came up, a lot of people in the room, including myself, said, And I was wondering if you would find it. It's brown with lines going parallel and going horizontal. That's not the one. It's sort of in the middle, I guess. it's more in the middle.
More in the middle?
It's got lines going horizontal and vertical. And it almost looked like a piece of fabric, actually. Oh, the one, you just passed it. Or just that.
This one?
That's it.
Okay.
And what is that about?
This project was called Street Life: A Vortex, and I made it in Kiev in 2012. I was there for 17 days. I collected. They didn't have any garbage in Kiev, which was amazing. Everything was used. So the kinds of garbage that I could get was like maybe a pot that looked like it was 70 years old on the side of a road, or food garbage. I went to a dump and it was straight up, it was just food trash. So it was actually very difficult to try to find materials there. I brought this silver paper with me, which was like donated materials that I got from this place called Material for the Arts in New York City. But the two bases that these two sculptures are sitting on are cans that were wrapped and gotten from that particular dump. And this is an intersecting vortex that was in the following room. But the whole idea with this, it was also based on a Klaus Oldenburg installation that he had at Judson Church in the 60s called The Street. And he just made this installation off of like materials that he collected in the street and had performances happen in there. But I was thinking about the life of the street. What actually is the life of the street, or what is the temperature of the street in Kiev in 2012, which I don't really think that this is an accurate portrayal of that. This is just meditation of my time in that space and place. But also, as I said, I bring my grandmother everywhere. So that figure seated there is called Invisible Woman. And my grandmother died in December 2011, and this was the end of 2012 or fall 2012. But the garbage bag had a bunch of belongings and medications and like shot glasses and things that belonged to her in that, and then ceramic objects that my dad made when he was a kid. So I don't think my grandmother ever got to leave the United States, but it was something that traveled as a surrogate instead as her proxy. And then I did find this piece of felt there. I don't remember where in the street, like that black kind of figure. And then I just stuck a kind of mannequin leg that I had brought with me coming out of that. I didn't see anybody sleeping in the streets there, though.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking the question.
Hi, how's it going? Wow, that was really loud. So I was really interested in hearing what you guys had to say about community and the idea that community can really support a person. And I feel like the importance of community is like really showing in my life a lot right now. But it feels like there's like this secondary force that's coming in where like the community that I live in is no longer just the people around me, but also like all of the people like both in my like home, in my school, in my town, in my state, throughout the country. It feels like social media, the internet, communication has sort of broadened our community in a way that sometimes feels a little overwhelming. And I sort of wonder if you guys have any like either aspirations, tips, hopes, dreams about ways in which we could maybe even use art to bridge the gap between like ourselves and our community, even on like a larger scale, or if you think that like the local community is the only way to go.
Just thinking about this, about your question. The part of your question is, what is it that art? How can artwork connect with community? Well, the way I think of artwork is that the beginning of the artwork it begins from that connection with the community. It is the responsibility of the artist is to reflect their community and to communicate with their community and to help give the community avenues for communicating with each other and ways of understanding events that are happening around them. So so without community, for me there is no art. You know, it's like it's just stuff. You know, it's just things. You know, it's just manufacturing. If they're without the community, so the community is first.
I think the way that you described, kind of like, throwing a stone and then seeing the reverberations of how we're functioning, is probably how we've always functioned, but now there's like this electronic way to see it differently, like mapped out differently. The actions of one person that reverberates, that affects a family, that affects a block, a neighborhood, a community, and it gets larger and larger and larger, or top-down way of, or not, it's still the same, right? Because it's that one drop that elected the crappy president, right? Like it's the first move that reverberates continuously. But I would say probably, and I don't want to put it into a hierarchy of what kinds of communications could mean more than something else. But I feel like the day-to-day, the dirty relationships, I mean, that's like, for me, like, that's where the real struggle is, right? That's where you have to like stretch yourself the most, and instead of maybe somebody that you're like-minded with, that you talk to occasionally with on Instagram and like each other's stuff, like, yeah, y'all in community together, but you know what I mean? But it's not the same as like, like thugging it out with somebody who's really getting on your nerves right now, and and really still wanting to learn and grow from that relationship. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's that place where the truth can't be concealed. You
Right.
know, it's
Yeah,
like
yeah. Exactly. Nobody's pretending
That's
anymore.
right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Use the microphone,
Somebody
please.
give him a mic.
Hi, guys. Quick observation and then a question for Abigail. Great talk. Your works are so seemingly disparate, right? Abigail, you work with this sort of gorgeous, cluttered abstraction, and Daniel, you're like finely crafted emotional narratives. But you're coming at the same question, and I just love that. The space-time, the dimensionality of space-time, and Daniel with your distant holler, thinking about how events, and especially tragedies, don't end, they echo, oftentimes with increasing frequency. But my real question is about TV. Abigail, we've been watching the exhibit. And the most astonishing aspect of that show is not the way Kenny Schachter tucks his shirt and his sweater into his sweatpants, but it's that you give people 10 hours and then judge them. And I just wonder if you could just quickly address how ridiculous and wonderful that is.
Yeah, I don't know.
And we loved you on there. You were a spark.
Thank you. I didn't write that show, so I don't know about the confines of the time limits of making something. But you can make something in 10 hours. You can. Mm-hmm. I don't know how fair that is to judge an artwork, because I mean, especially with pressure, some people really thrive under it and other people choke. So it's also maybe not the best lubricant for art making either.
I guess I'll also say great talk. Thank you guys so much for sharing. One thing that kept hitting me when we were speaking about science is archaeology, and how in some ways what you're doing is imagining an archaeology from Malaga, because they stole everything that was there. As far as I don't know everything, but like they removed bones and they removed the pieces of people's history, and you are kind of collecting other people's history and putting it in front of people. And I just think there was an interesting line between like the rooted pictures, paintings of yours and these people, and kind of what you're bringing together to kind of create I guess archaeological, or a form where you are working with where there is no form anywhere. Anyway, I don't know if that's exactly a question, but do you guys think about archaeology at all? Maybe is the question. And like spirit, because there seems to be some sort of tie in there.
I think about archaeology a lot, and I really am thankful to the archaeologists. What archaeologists and scientists in general, scientists, yellowishes, bubblerishas, spiritual people, shaman, what they allow, what they do is they give me a starting place. They give me a foundation in order to create imagery, to understand the world, understand what's happening. And they also give me a freedom to twist these images and twist these objects and things and rearrange things and move things around. They have the systems. I'm just moving things around, trying to get a better understanding of it, trying to get another angle on what's happening, and so that's what the archaeologists allowed me to do with the work from Malaga. I didn't have to repeat their work. I'm working on expression, and they gave me, and I see that as freedom, freedom to tell this story in my way, tell this story in a different way. The material is here, the material is there, it is laid out, and you can look at it and understand it if you can. But the narrative and the story is what I want to work with. I want to work with that story. And because we, like I said in the beginning, we have imaginations, and our minds do not stop, and we love stories, and we hold things in our minds as stories a lot easier than we do a long list of facts.
Yeah, I always say trash is just, the archaeology of right now. And so I'm always thinking about that as well. It's like, how can we tell the stories that were purposely forgotten yesterday through the material of now, or some of the things that were maybe like grandma's desk or something, like something that also has like the texture and the residue that has been left on it in the using. So there is something there that is from the past, that is speaking about the past, but also in the present. I don't know, just trying to collapse time in on itself, and then using these objects as raw material to tell the story.
Well, Abigail and Daniel, I can't think of a nicer note on which to conclude this conversation with this reference to the materials that are in front of us right now, some of which we may seek to hold on to, some of which we may seek to discard, and the question of their relationship many generations going forward, I think, is so exciting and stimulating to the imagination, as have been all of the comments you've made this evening, and the wonderful comments and questions that have come forward from the audience. This has been such an enjoyable conversation. I'm so happy that you all could be with us. Daniel and Abigail, thank you for giving us an opportunity to come together. And we'll look forward to continuing this conversation with you going forward. Thank you again for being with us this evening.